Alright, if this is on, I don't know, I can never tell. I think it's on now. So we're going to look at a little something here that came up, and this is just off the wall, just off the top of my head. I tried to hide identities here on these two little clips of text messages that I think were public as far as I know, so I'm not trying to, pick on anybody or do a hit piece or anything like that. But it raises a couple of things, and I wanted to address those real quick before they leave my head. And excuse me, I just ate. The question is about quantum mechanics and particles and light and all that sort of thing. Is light a particle? Yes and no. It depends on what you mean by particle. Because in electromagnetism, there is such a thing as a smallest possible unit of energy that can be transferred or used to do something. That's what a photon is, what a electromagnetic particle is, a quantum is. Quanta is plural. And I don't see my chat right now. I don't know what happened, but anyway. So the smallest possible packet of energy is the best definition I could find for what a quantum is. A particle, a packet of energy that cannot be any less than. It isn't a sliding scale. You either have zero energy that's detectable or usable in any way, and then suddenly you have something. That suddenly you have something is the smallest possible packet of energy, for lack of a better term. That's what photons are, because they're just in the spectrum of light as a subset of the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. And radiation just means to emit, to put out. It's not everything is poisonous that's radiation. There's certain types of radiation that are. But the point is that with electromagnetism, of which light is a subset, you have minimal energy packets. What's going on inside those energy packets is anybody's guess, because they're the minimum thing detectable, right? So you can't do any better than that. So is light electromagnetic? Absolutely yes. This is proved. But is it made of particles? Is it made of minimal packets of energy? It seems to be, because we can detect minimal packets of energy. It's the smallest thing we can detect that actually does something or transfers heat. So with that understanding, with that definition, yes, light is made of particles, because there's a minimal thing that's either on or off. It's not a sliding scale, like if you have a bowl of water and you gently tip it, you might get a slight little tremor in the water, a slight little wave. Electromagnetic energy is not like that. So you have an on-off as to whether there's energy at all, and that on point is a photon or a quantum, as far as I understand it. I may be wrong, but that's the way I understand it, right? So the question being presented here on the left seems to be not understanding that definition. It's not about guessing that something acts a certain way, therefore it must be a particle. It's simply defining what a particle is. A minimal detectable amount of energy which is suddenly on or off, and that's what light is observed to be, as far as we can observe such little things, or any electromagnetic energy, anything on the spectrum. So it's burning a straw man to say that believing that light is made of quanta or photons is no different from believing in gravity as a force, or whatever people want to say, because in Newtonian, so-called, even though he didn't come up with the theory, he theorized about it, but he did not postulate a law or anything like that. The classical theory of gravity is that it is a force, but the Einsteinian theory of gravity, the quantum physics definition, is that it is an effect. So one is a cause and one is an effect, and you can't have it both ways. It's either one or the other. It cannot be its own cause. That's a logical impossibility, and certainly scientifically impossible. Nothing can cause itself. So gravity is in a totally different ballgame, a totally different ballpark than electromagnetic quanta. So there's no double standard here when it comes to demanding scientific evidence for gravity, whatever the heck it is, and scientific evidence for photons. They're not in the same ballpark at all. And the PS part there in the middle is unrelated to any conversation that I was aware of was going on. Yes, it can be argued that the quantum eraser delayed choice experiment specifically proves that a knower is required for anything to exist. And I'm not going to go into all the details of that. I'm not the best qualified to do it anyway. But the point is that nobody depends on that experiment to believe in God. There's plenty more, such as biology. I mean, life itself, even the so-called simplest life form, it seems just like quanta or photons, there's a minimal point at which life can happen, and it's complex. It's not just random chemicals smashing together, and as I've often said, what came first, the laws of physics or the matter they act upon. So there is no other possible explanation that anyone has ever come up with for why nature does what it does. It is designed to do it. The chemicals have to exist, they have to have been produced somehow, and they have to have laws that they follow in order to interact and react and cause things to happen. Those are all programmed. There's all evidence of design. And it's a double standard to say, well, we can look at, say, a jet aircraft and say, that's evidence of design, but look at the people who designed it and say that's an accident. It's just nonsense. So to bring in the argument of we don't need this experiment to prove a creator is burning a straw man, because nobody brought it up. It's just one of many. And a not necessary plank in anybody's faith in God. It has to do with the logical conclusion that design requires a designer. So to bring that up is a bit disingenuous, in my opinion, when the argument wasn't about creation at all. It was about photons. So nobody is, quote, placing creationists hand in hand with quantum mechanics. Who is doing that? It's a straw man. Nobody's doing that. And then to call that a psyop is calling your straw man a psyop. So divide and conquer can be, that kind of a charge can go in any direction here. But nobody, again, the all caps, nobody is actually saying that a creator cannot exist if quantum mechanics fails. Nobody makes that argument. So straw man. But again, when going on reading the little box on the right, nobody is saying that this is a necessary connection, and it seems that this person does not understand what a quantum particle is. It's kind of redundant, quantum particle. It is as I said, a minimal packet of energy that's either no energy or suddenly you have that. That's why it's not analog. That's why it's not a wave. And though I know waves are not all sine waves. I've done a video on it, Let There Be Light, making waves. I did a whole video on that on my YouTube channel. But the point is that to say that light can't be particles because it's all guesswork is to misunderstand what quanta are. Minimal packets of energy that are on or off, and then they can be more intensified from that point, but there comes a point where you minimize the amount of energy until it's suddenly gone. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about photons. So we're not taking anyone's word for it. We're doing experiments that show you either have energy or you don't. And this counter argument to all of that is itself the cherry picking and straw man burning. So I don't know if I've cleared anything up, but this is my opinion of the words that were shown to me on the screen that you see here about the issue of quantum eraser, delayed choice experiment, photons, what they really are, what any electromagnetic wave is made of, so-called. And wave is just, it's a repeating pattern. But to say that light is, for example, in certain wavelengths is just, it's how the math formulas work out that you can draw a wave function of how this thing changes over time, how the intensity or amplitude can change over time. And those are not physical waves. I was telling somebody just a while ago, in my electronics work, we used things called oscilloscopes. What they are is you can put probes on a circuit, and depending on what's going on in the circuit, you may see, or whether you're recording sound or whatever it is, you will see something like a sine wave, or sometimes a sawtooth wave, or triangle waves, or square waves. Those are not physical waves at all. Nothing is waving. There's no material that's waving. What it's doing is simply showing you a change in voltage or signal over time, and that this change goes through cycles. That's all we mean by waves when we talk about waves of light or waves of photons or electromagnetic particles. Sound waves are entirely different. Those are longitudinal waves, which are compression, rarefaction. Like if you're holding up a slinky and go like that with it, you'll get compression and rarefaction, or move it back and forth, you'll see the compression travel back and forth along the slinky. And that's how sound works. You have to have a medium that compresses and rarefacts. So if you knock on a door, you're pushing the molecules in the door, and they will react like a slinky. And if it's through air or whatever, if you got your ear next to the door, the eardrum will respond to that change in pressure. And that's a longitudinal wave, and that's how you hear sound. And it's very, very complicated as to what's going on with that wave, but that's the basic frequency of the wave. Because you can have timbre, which is the musical term for wave form, not necessarily, the bass pitch is the wave, the frequency, the cycles per second, or hertz, named after Hertz, a cycle from a starting point back to that starting point through 180 degrees. That's what a cycle is. But waves in general are a complicated thing, but when we're talking about electromagnetism, we're talking about minimal packets of energy, discrete units that can be counted. And that's why we call them particles. It's not particles as you think of them. I think it'd be more useful to call them packets of minimal energy. Minimal being the starting point, but you can have, more intense packets. But the point is that a photon is the smallest little bit of energy you can detect. And there's no sliding scale to that. So there you have it. Don't burn straw man. Don't cherry pick yourself if you're making arguments like this. Nobody's saying it's an actual bit of matter. We're just saying that's an amount of energy. And what the heck is energy? Nobody knows. Nobody knows what a field is in physics, really. They don't know. And some of their definitions are circular, such as between mass and momentum and energy. It gets very, very blended. They're all kind of the same thing. And so there's a point at which I think it's impossible to wrap our minds around how reality manifests. But I think the point of the quantum eraser delayed choice experiment is to prove that having a knower does make the manifestation of this ethereal thing, not ether, but ethereal thing we call energy, into physical things that, things that we know as physical. So this is being oversimplified in the comment, in my opinion, that there's a lack of understanding of what a photon or a particle is. It's unfair to compare that lack of understanding with anything any of us argued, and then to tie it to creationism is disingenuous, in my opinion. So there you go. I don't know if anybody listened to this, but it is being recorded, and I may upload it to YouTube in a little bit. So if you're listening, thanks, and we'll see you later.